Okay, so here we go with Northern Flora block number 1, Forget Me Not. So we're kind of, for people who have been doing the class in 2023, this is actually Forget Me Not 2.0. Our first video got removed, but if you are doing this anytime after 2023, this will be your first lesson. So we are going to go through some of the steps that you're going to want to take before each block and complete our block number 1. Okay, so what I've got today for my tools is a pencil, some paper scissors, some nice, sharp, good fabric scissors, and I really like these, I think they're 7-inch, 8-inch, they're 8-inch dressmaker shears from Ginger, and I love them because they cut all the way to the point. I really, really like that about these scissors. You know, some of them, they kind of have a gap right here at the top. These ones go all the way to the tip, and that's one of the things I love about those. And then you also want to have some little thread scissors. And an iron. I have this little handy dandy little travel iron that I'm using today. You want to have it on about a medium setting, and you need to know your iron to know what that is. We don't want it, some irons, I've had multiple irons over the years, and some of them are very, very cool, and I max them out, and it feels like that's like the temperature of like a medium to medium low on another iron I might have that gets super hot. So know your iron. You kind of want it in the medium range. You don't want it too hot. You want to be able to actually go, oh, okay, and I'm not burned. You can pat it and it's not burning me. If you barely touch it and that's too hot, and you don't want to be you don't want it too low either, because you do want it to get that heat in there. And when we go to do steaming later, you want to definitely make sure it's warm enough to be doing some steaming. But I usually put it on kind of a medium setting. And again, know your iron and what you want to do or where you want to go with that. And then I also have a applique pressing sheet. We only use this briefly in this class because most of the arrangements are done directly on the fabric. But if you get into doing more of my designs, you're definitely going to want to get one of these. This one I have is actually a kind of an odd size. It was a really, really big one that I cut to smaller pieces. But the good starting size is the 13 by 17 that you can get online. They're at most craft stores will have them. It's called an applique pressing sheet. And I really like the 13 by 17 size. That's what I started with. And then I got an 18 by 20, I think, years later. And that one I actually really like too. But if it gets bigger than that, I find that they are a little, I don't know, they're a little wobbly and stuff. Like it's too much almost to have to manage. So the 13 by 17 is great, does most things very well. The 18 by 20 for some of my larger designs, if you're wanting to fit like the whole animal, like a bear or a moose or something, you might want a larger size. Anything above that, you're probably going to end up doing what I did. And I just cut this one. This one was like cut into 4s or 6s. I can't remember. I cut them into smaller ones so they're a little more manageable. That way. And of course you can always do that. You have some friends and you're all wanting to invest, buy a really big one and cut it up. Okay, so to start block number 1, the first thing I'm going to do, and this is my one to show you what I've done, but I've got another block here ready to go. So a couple things we're going to do ahead of time before every class. One of those things is, and we're going to go through, well, I'll do this first. One of those things is cutting your background square to a 10.5 by 10.5. So take your background fabric, rinse it, iron it out, make it really nice and flat, and then cut it to a 10.5 by 10.5 inch square. So have that ready to go before every class. You're also going to want to take your pencil, and I love mechanical pencils because they stay nice and sharp, and I don't have to worry about sharpening them and everything, so that's my favorite thing about those. And label all your applique pieces. So if you go into your Forget Me Not page here and you take a look, you're going to find that all the different colors are separated out and all the appliques are going to be arranged pretty much in the order that they are. This one you'll see I moved number C over a little bit just to make it fit in the square a little better and not waste fabric and seam a seam for this little piece sticking out. But in general, when you take a look at them, you can kind of compare the shapes. The shapes are going to be about the same, and I try to keep them in the same order, unless it's something really large that, like I said, I was able to squeeze into a little better shape for the cutting and not wasting so much fabric, because the less you waste, the less you have to charge for stuff. So we'll try to keep costs down as much as I can. And so anyhow, so you'll see that everything is arranged this way, and you're going to write on the paper side. Don't write on your fabric side. I know some people who have done that. Always write on the paper side. You write on the fabric side, that pencil marking is going to be difficult to get off. You don't want to see that. So we're writing on the paper side of everything. Like here's all of these ones. Pay attention on these lighter colors. Again, look for the grid on the back. This is kind of harder to see, this grid. It's in yellow. Some of the Steam-A-Seam also has a blue grid, but most of the time you're going to find it in yellow. And so you write on that grid side. And you want to go ahead and label everything. If it says 17A, make sure you include the A, because that'll be important as we go to arrange things. So I've got everything labeled and ready to go here. And the other thing that I like to do is I make a photocopy of my layout guide. And the reason that I do that is going to be because when you go to put it on your light table or against a window or whatever you do to, even if you're just laying the fabric directly onto this without any sort of light behind it, you're going to find that if you do it on the book and you have light behind it, you're going to see through everything from the other reverse side of the page. So if you make a photocopy and you have it blank on the back, you won't see any extra lines coming through when you put the light behind it. I do highly recommend a light table. You don't have to have a light table. If you don't have a light table and you don't want to invest in one at the moment, you can definitely get a piece of glass, stick a lamp under it or a flashlight or something and make your own light table. I've even many years ago, before I had one, I would even sometimes tape my background on a window and then tape my fabric up so it hung, you know, pretty nicely, and stuck it onto a window, because once you peel the paper off of the backs of all your little applique shapes, they do have a tackiness to them and they will hold in place pretty well. So make sure that you have a photocopy ready. It's also very helpful when you go to arrange to be able to reference the numbers and things on your book and not on this, because if you can't find 19 and you have your fabric on top of it, and you got it like this, and it's kind of hard even with a light table to see the lettering and the numbers and read through the fabric. So what I'll do, so I don't have to keep moving this around, is I'll just kind of look on my book and be like, where is 19? Where is 19? Oh, here it is. Okay. And I can see the picture's identical, that's this one here. And so it helps me also to not have to move my fabric background a lot by just kind of referencing this. Okay, and so real quick, before we get started, the other thing that you want to have done before every class is you want to have your cathedral window appliques cut out. Now, what are those? Okay, on page 4 of your book, you have this applique shape here on the side, and I've already traced one of them on my Steam-A-Seam, and I'm going to go through the process of doing this with you for this first class. But before every other class, you want to have 4 of your cathedral window appliques cut out and ready to go. And I've got 2 of them ready, and we're going to go through the process for these last 2 to show you how I do it and how you use Steam-A-Seam. So in addition to this, and this is actually the step where you'll use your pressing sheet, you'll want to have an iron, your ironing board ready to go. And so let's do the tracing process here. So just so you get a little lesson on how Steam-A-Seam works. Okay, so I've already traced one of my appliques onto here. And the reason I did that is save some time, but I wanted to show you how I do this. So you can trace them 1, 2, 3, oops, sorry, wiggle in my camera, bonk my camera, 1, 2, 3, whatever, 4 to do them. But what I like to do is I like to trace them 2 at a time in this kind of, making this kind of melon shape. And the reason I do this is because it saves me 1 cut. So when you go to trace, always trace on your grid side of your Steam-A-Seam. So I always use light Steam-A-Seam too. The reason I like the light is it's just a lighter weight glue. And I like the lighter weight glue because that heavier weight glue, especially if it's something that you're putting layers on, it really bulks up after a while. And if you're going to use it as a quilt, the Steam-A-Seam glue is going to add some stiffness. So if you have a lighter weight glue, it's still going to hold really well, but it's going to reduce some of that stiffness that you're going to find. Okay, so common mistakes I find with people when they're using Steam-A-Seam. Tracing on the wrong side. This side has no grid. This side does, and I think you can see that there in the camera. It's a little 1-inch square grid with yellow markings. Sometimes you'll find it with blue markings. Most of the time it's yellow though. So I've traced one, then I've flipped it around, and I've traced the other one. So now I have this melon shape. So first mistake I find that people make all the time. At this point, before you've stuck it on fabric, you do not want to cut on these lines. We're going to just cut off. I don't like to have extra glue stuck on my scraps of fabric, so I just kind of cut off roughly around the outside. Oh, it doesn't even have to be close. And actually this bottom corner, I don't even care about that. But you're roughly cutting outside the line. If you're ever doing any of my other designs where you cut it yourself and you have something like this where you have a group, I trace the whole group and then I just roughly cut around the group. So in this case, we got 2 here. I've just roughly cut around. Do not waste your time cutting precisely on your lines right now. You're going to hate it because when you go to cut it out of the fabric, it's going to be much more difficult to cut than if you have some steam seam on either side of your line, because that glue and that paper on the other side, when you go to cut it, it actually supports the fabric better. So when you're cutting, it's much easier to cut. Okay, so we've traced everything on the grid side. We have roughly cut around our group here. And now I'm just going to move my book out of the way for a moment. Now I'm going to take my fabric. Now you'll find with batiks, there's not always really a noticeable right side or wrong side. There is, on some of them, a noticeable right side and wrong side. And it usually has to do with how visible the texture is. On print batiks, sometimes you'll notice on one side where the stamping was that there are little dots. That is just, that to me indicates that is the wrong side of the fabric. Now, sometimes it's not noticeable at all. So if you are concerned about a right or wrong side, you can look at it, and whichever side you like the best, make sure you apply the steam seam to the opposite of that. Most of the time you won't notice. And if you do happen to put it on what is technically the wrong side, you're probably not going to notice that either. So on this particular batik, I looked at it pretty closely, and sometimes with these ones that have a really dark background and a lighter stamp, sometimes you'll notice like little black dots in there. And I don't really like the black dots if I'm looking at it close, but as soon as you get a little far away, sometimes it's hard to tell. So on this one, it's actually, I'm not even sure which side is the right or wrong side. It is very difficult to tell. There doesn't really seem to be much of a difference. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as this being the wrong side facing up. And I'm going to take my appliques and I'm just going to peel off. I'm peeling off just this back layer of paper. My glue is stuck here to the drawn side. So I've got my glue and I've got my paper. I'm just peeling that paper off, and that's just going to be thrown away. Then I take my applique and I just stick it right on my fabric, lightly press it down. And now, grab my ironing board, just one second. Okay, so now I'm going to gently press the fusible onto the fabric. I'm not fusing it right now. I'm just getting it enough warmth on that glue to hold it to the fabric well. And this is another mistake I find people make a lot, is you think that you have to fuse it at this point. And then you overheat the glue. And when you go to actually fuse to your background, you've kind of fried the glue. You've given it too much heat already and it won't stick well. So at this point, I have my iron. I haven't touched it yet. You're going to notice also a little difference in the look of the paper where you fused it and where you haven't, and especially if your iron is too hot. So this is one of the areas where I say, make sure your iron is not at a super, super high heat. We want it kind of medium, medium low. So I'm going to just go ahead, and this is how fast we're going to do it. I'm going to do half of it so that maybe in the video, you'll be able to kind of see how the paper kind of gets a little translucent. So I'm going to start in the middle here. Now, ready, set down, press over. That's it. Oh, good. And you can see in the video where my iron line is here. And so you can see how the appearance of the paper is going to change a little bit. Here it's kind of stuck. The glue is kind of fusing to this, and it gives it a little bit more of a translucent look, as opposed to this area where I haven't fused. But we're fusing very short amount of time, very lightly. So ready, and press down, move it over, and that's good to go. And you can see, I can still kind of see that, but that's okay. I know that it is fused on there just enough just to stick. Now, because I don't like a bunch of fabric hanging off the side of the weight, I'm just going to go ahead and cut off my scrap. And when you have in your kit, you will have extra of this fabric left over on each block. Do not throw this away and don't use it in another project, because we're going to use this later when we go to finish the quilt and we do all these little setting triangles that finish the circles. Those are going to be cut from your scraps from your blocks. So hang on to these, keep it with your scraps for later when we go to do the finishing kit in the 7th month. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and I've gently fused my, and you can see it's stuck on there really good, gently fused my applique pieces to my fabric. Now I'm going to cut them. And the reason that I like to use these dressmaker shears, I mentioned before, is that they cut all the way to the tip. And so when I go to cut, I like to open my scissors really wide, start way back there, and just cut long strokes all the way to the tip there. So long strokes. And the reason I like to do that is it helps keep your edge from getting like a jaggedy look, like cut. These long strokes give you a very nice, smooth edge. So we're going to cut around. And on this too, I like my strokes to be nice and long and smooth. So if I don't follow the line absolutely perfectly, that's okay. As long as on this side, we have this nice curve that has no jaggediness and it looks like it's a seamed edge. Okay, this stuff is just garbage. And now I'm going to cut my one line down the center. So if you were to trace these separately, you'd have to cut this line twice. Because I, go ahead and cut and trace them in this way, when I cut that last line, I get 2. All right, so I have the 2 I just cut. I have the 2 I already cut. So we end up with 4 to start our block. And that's all I'll need for these scissors, and that's all I'll need for my paper scissors. So those are getting put away. Okay, so now let's actually start on our block. Set my stuff off to the side. Oh, and I didn't, because I was giving a demonstration of how to fuse this onto your fabric. Here's a scrap of steam seam. Here's my steam seam. So if I was to fuse this onto fabric, and just because I forgot to show you the applique pressing sheet because of the demo there. If I was to take this, peel the paper off and stick it on here, and this is my shape. When you get to this point, this is where you would also use your pressing sheet. You would lay it down on top of that and then iron over that. And again, down, over, up. You don't go down and hold, down and hold, down and hold. Don't do that. That's too much heat. Set it down, swipe it across, lift it up. That's enough. And that's the reason for the pressing sheet is if any glue seeps out from under these edges, then it's on your pressing sheet and not on your iron and not on your fabric. Mostly your iron. It protects your iron more than anything else. And so that's what's great about these. And that's the only time you're going to really need it in this process. And it's not 100% necessary. So if you don't want to buy one, that's okay. But you might double check your iron afterwards or after a few times and just make sure that you're not getting any glue onto this side of your iron, or you'll want to clean that off, because then when you go to fuse later, you can end up getting glue on your flowers and you don't want to do that. Okay, so now we're going to start the process of arranging our forget-me-not. Okay, so let's go to pages 10 and 11 of your book. I'm just going to set my book off to the side here because I really like, again, to look at or to arrange onto a copy of my layout guide so that I don't have to be sitting here trying to go, where's number 12? Where's number 15? So that way I kind of get to just leave it here. So now we're going to line up our background with, you'll see there's these 2 little short lines in the top corners and these longer lines in the bottom corners. That's where we're going to line up our background. So it goes in on point. And you might notice in my printed copy that I don't have the assembly instructions. That's because I printed one from my computer from my original layout from when we did this as a shop hop, and it wasn't the book assembly instructions. So if you make a photocopy, you'll have those instructions, but I just kind of follow the ones in the book. So I've got my background in place. I've got all my little appliques and they're all labeled. I've got my thread scissors ready, and I've got my cathedral window appliques. Now, one thing people will also jump forward and try to do is arrange their cathedral window appliques first. Don't do that either. You want to follow the instructions, because we actually, in some blocks, we're going to arrange maybe a stem or two and then cover up the edge of that stem with the bottom two appliques. We might be doing something where some of the blocks will say just put the top two on and wait to put the others. So wait until you are instructed in the assembly instructions on when and where you put your cathedral window appliques. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my light table too. And so you'll see right off the bat, my light table's up pretty bright, how easy it is to see the design through the light table. It's a little challenging for you guys to see in the video, so I'm going to turn mine down a little bit. There it goes. So that it's a little easier for you to see. So one of the things that people will sometimes also like to do is tape their background down to their light table, and you can certainly do that. You can also tape the fabric down after you put the cathedral window appliques down. I would recommend not doing it till after that, because then you'll have to peel it up and everything to put these down, because they go up to the edge. But once you put the cathedral window appliques down, if you want to tape your fabric to your background, or here, to hold everything secure and in place, that's fine. You're welcome to do that, and a lot of people do. Okay, so we're going to start with our assembly instructions. So I'm going over here and I'm reading assemble in the following order. So the first step, step A, is stem 1. So we're going to go to our green sheet here, and I have stem 1 labeled right here. And so when you go to take these out, this is another thing, if you notice, I kind of pop to the side, pop, 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 and I give them a little tug. Some of the real thin ones, they are more delicate and you want to be a little more gentle with that. But some of the larger pieces, I just kind of pull, pop, pull, pop, pull, pop them out. And if you find something is holding in there really tight, that's what your thread scissors are for. Sometimes little threads get where they, basically the way the laser machine works is it's doing these tiny little perforations throughout all the lines. And so occasionally there's a thread that maybe holds a little bit that it didn't get cut 100%. So if that's the case, you want to grab your thread scissors and you can cut it out of the background, or sometimes, and on this one, it's hard to, I'm sure it's very hard to see in the video, there's a tiny little thread sticking out, and I'm just going to snip that off. You don't have to, but you might want to, and especially if it's something that's like a dark color going onto a light background where you maybe will see it more. And then to peel the paper off, I will just do a little fold. And a lot of the times that will make the paper, I don't know if you can see so well there. Oops, dropped it. It will make the paper stick out, and the paper will fold and stay folded, and the fabric will release from it. That's one useful way to get them to peel off. And you just peel off the paper background. Now I have my sticky back. And stem number 1 is behind this little group down here. So when I go to arrange something like this, you don't want to put like, oh, I'm going to start way down here. What I like to do is I always like to arrange my appliques kind of from the center. So because we have this little fork area here, I'm going to actually lay it down and arrange that fork into place. Let the stem come down. And you'll notice it's going under that cathedral window line. That's going to hide that stem when we get to that point. And actually we're at that point because that's the only thing you do in step A, and step B is to put all the cathedral windows down. So take our first one. And again, I like to kind of fold it, and that helps sort of release the paper. Not always, but it is a little trick that I do. Peel off the paper. And now on these cathedral window appliques, when it says to do them all, there's no specific order that you need to do them. It's not like do the top 2, bottom 2, side 2, and then these 2. You can do them 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do opposites, whatever you want to do. When it says all cathedral windows, just put them all down. If it tells you to do just the top, right, and left, do only those 2. But in this case, on block number 1, we put them all down. So as you lay them down, you just kind of want to line it up with the edge of your background. And that edge, if it's not perfect, that's okay because it's going to be part of the seam allowance. You're going to lose about a quarter inch there. So I'm peeling off the other one and I'm just centering them onto my background. And if at this point it moves around a little bit, you know, like sometimes if it's like, I kind of like to just do them right in front of me, and I might move my background around off the layout guide while I put these down and not worry about the flowers in the background at the moment, and just kind of get them centered and on there. And the tips of these will hang off just slightly. So there is a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch or so on each side. That is a hangover. And that is actually what you want. It's again going to be in the seam allowance. So, okay, so I've got all those down. So now I'm going to just go ahead and put this back in place, line back up my stem, line it up with my corners. And now if you want to tape them down, this is a good time to just put a couple little pieces of tape, just 2 like that. We'll hold it in place. See, we're all good. We're not going to move anywhere now. I don't often do that, but it's something that a lot of people do appreciate. And especially if your some light tables are at an angle, that is very helpful because they will naturally slide from gravity. And so mine, I have a nice flat one, and it doesn't move too much, but it will help you from accidentally bumping. And there are a few times where I've been arranging something and I didn't realize that it was off a little bit. And I was arranging all my little flowers, and then I go to do my next part and I realize, oh shoot, I'm crooked. And I straighten it up, and now the flowers I just did are off a little bit. If you do something like that, do not go try to pull all the flowers off and make them perfect again. I can promise you that if you just straighten it up at that point, which I'm going to take the tape off because I'll show you as we get going. But if I want to, if I accidentally say I'm arranging this one and I accidentally moved my thing like this and I didn't realize it, and I get all done with this section and I go to do this and go, oh no, oh, I moved it, oh shoot. I'm just going to straighten it out and let those be off slightly and then put the rest of them on. When you go later and you do this, whoop, and this is gone, you're never going to notice that maybe this group is 3 or 4 millimeters off from this group, from this. Nobody's going to see this anymore. So don't worry about that. I always try to tell people, I'm not telling you to be sloppy, but I am going to tell you that these designs are actually very forgiving, and nature is very forgiving, and it's never perfect, and nobody's flowers are going to look exactly the same as yours, even doing this. So don't worry about those little minor imperfections. Once this paper is removed from the back, you'll never see them. Okay, so let's move on. So step C is stem 2. So I'm just going to get stem 2 out of here. So again, just kind of gently tugging. I'm kind of holding on to the applique as I go around and I tug it out. And if I have a spot, which I just had a spot where I have a little thread here that is really stuck, if you pull on that, you run the risk that it's going to pull the thread out from the applique, and you'll have this little line, which you, once you go to remove it from a light table, you won't notice that line so much, but when you put it on the light table, you'll see the light coming through where that thread was pulled out. Again, you're not going to see it once the light is removed from behind it, but it is something you don't want to do if you can help it. So if you have any of those stick, just grab your little thread scissors and snip them. And sometimes you have threads that stick out from like sections between the cuts. And if you have those too, you can snip those off as well. Okay, so stem 2. So I often, as I mentioned before, reference here. So instead of me going, oh, which one? Is this stem 2? Is this stem 2? Which one's stem 2? And being like doing this all the time, I'm just going to look over here and I can see, oh, stem 2 is this one. So it's this one. Also, if you do want to look under here, one of the things that I will do is I will prep my hand down on part of it, hold it really steady in place, lift and peek. So if I'm like, okay, we get to 11, 12, 13, so I know which way to go on that. If you want to do it like that, you can always lift and peek. Going the other way, hold it steady, lift and peek. But I really like to use my layout guide in my book to reference than trying to mess with that too much. So I'm peeling the paper off the back of stem 2. And again, I'm going to find kind of somewhere in the center where I have like a defining characteristic, like this little cross area here. And I'm just going to line up that cross area first. He wants to do his own thing. Okay, there we go. So line that up and just sort of let everything fall. Now, when you peel on stems and things that are longer pieces, when you peel that paper off the back, you do have a tendency to do slight, what do you call it, stretching. And so when I get my stem down here, as I get to the top, I'm slightly stretched, and that's okay. It's not major, but it's another reason why if you start in the middle and you let it go this way and go this way, if you do have a little bit of a stretch, it's going to kind of make that stretch. Oh, I don't have the words this morning, but it's going to basically balance it out over the entire stem versus this being in a good place, and then as you get up here being way off. If you put it in the middle and this is a little off, but this is a little off, it kind of spreads it out across the whole stem. Okay, so we're on to step D, flowers 1 through 3, and it mentions after that flower pieces should be arranged in alphabetical order. So as an example, if you have a 3 with no A, B, or C written after it, you could just put 3. Then move on to 4. 4, if it has an A, B, C, D, you want to do those then in alphabetical order. So don't do 4A and move on to 5A. You want to go 4, A, B, C, D, whatever. Finish all the 4s before you move on to 5. So that's what that's trying to explain there to you. So we're going to do flowers 1 through 3. So I'm looking up here. Where's flowers 1 through 3? I have to find them. Where is it? Oh, yes, that's right. They're little buds. They kind of trick you. They're not really flowers yet. They're buds, but I called them flowers. So here's in the little pink. Here's my little 1 bud. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay that down, and you'll notice that a stem is going to cover that. So one of the other things is always follow the instructions, because there's a reason sometimes I don't have you put like every flower down right now. It's because 1 through 3, they're going to get covered by a stem. And if you moved on to do 4 and all that stuff, the stem is going to end up covering those. So put down flowers 1 through 3. Now these tiny little pieces, you're going to hate me by the end of block number 1, but I will tell you block number 1 is probably the most challenging because of all the little pieces that we have. The good news is there's no other block that has this many small pieces. So if you get block number 1 done, you can do all of them, promise. So we've done 1 through 3. We're going to move on to step E, which is leaf A. So now we're moving on to A. Why are we doing that? Because stem 3 is going to cover these buds and leaf A. So A, again, should be arranged under the alphabetical order, then subarranged by numerical order. So if we have an A1, so always, like I said, always make sure to write A1, B1, 15, A, 15, B, 15, C, whatever. Always write those down, because if it has a A1, oh, excuse me. If it has an A1, that means there's an A2. So we're going to pop out leaf A1. It's in this lighter green. I have a little thread sticking out there. I'm going to take A1, and this is leaf A. Now, one of the other things I will tell you is this was one of the first designs I was digitizing, and I wasn't always perfect and like brand new to that process. So you will find that some of them, when I digitized it, I had it inside the lines. And then when the laser cuts it, it kind of cuts it even smaller. So some of them might seem like they're a little small. I also digitized from my drawing page, not from my layout guide page. And I do hand draw everything. So the leaf might be slightly bigger on the layout guide that I drew than on the part that I digitized. So I do apologize if it frustrates anybody that they aren't all perfect. Like I said, this is kind of when I was new to digitizing. I am more accurate these days with my digitizing than I was before. So in this one block in particular, which was the first block I digitized of this series, some of the leaves and maybe some of the flowers might seem a little small for the one that it is, or not perfectly fitting. They will get better as I go along, because I was getting better at digitizing as we go along. But I noticed some people will be like, I'm not sure if this is a leaf. It's not as thick. And I've said, I'm sorry. Yes, I know. I hate digitizing though, and I don't want to do it over. So I always feel like it is what it is. And I'm really sorry if it annoys anybody. Sorry. So, okay. Leaf A. So I did A1, and as I was chattering on, I also put down A2, which is the little vein through the middle of the leaf there. And that was here. Now these little skinny ones, you want to be a little extra delicate when you're popping them out. You don't want to tear them. If you do tear them though, you can just take the two torn pieces, lay them down, put them next to each other, just butt them up to each other, and they will basically, almost like when you go to fuse, it will just sort of heal that tear and you won't really hardly even notice it. So if that does happen to you, just lay them on, butt them up to each other, and I might have that happen at some point, and I'll be able to show you how we fix that. Okay, so leaf A, and then right after that at the end it says and stem 3. I miss that sometimes when I have those little explanations, example, blah, 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 and then I realize, oh shoot, it said at the end to also add stem 3. So popping out stem 3 here. Oh, we've had cold weather for a few days, and now it's kind of warmed up a little and snowing today, and it always gets me stuffy. So I apologize for the stuffiness. So again, I'm going to lay stem 3. I'm kind of just going to lay here in the center-ish. Get that down. This one, now you might say, wait a minute, why is this one laying down over the cathedral window? And now I'm going to see this stem. Oh, no, you're not. Leaf E is going to cover it later. That's why. Oh, okay. Dana actually has a system here. There's a reason. Put some trust in me. Okay, so another area up here. And again, these sometimes will stretch a little bit. So I'm going to lay this down. Make sure that we're covering our little buds there. Lay this guy down. And I have a little bump happening right here. So I'm just going to lift this one up and just let it sort of fall down. Now, if you're ever fighting something where you're like, this isn't fitting, make sure the important areas where, like up here where it's going to cover those, make sure it's fitting up there. I'm actually going to move this little pink bud over just slightly, which you can absolutely do. If something lays down and you don't like the way it looks, rearrange it, fix it, make it where I don't want anything to bother anybody when they're finished. Like something isn't exactly right. So if something bothers you, just wiggle it, just fix it. Make it your own. Okay, so anyhow, I went ahead and I just lifted that up and I just kind of let it lay down. But you don't ever want to force anything. If you're forcing something, then it's best to just lift the whole thing up and lay it down again. And if on this one, it's more important to have this area kind of in the right place because more flowers are going to attach to these than this area. If this little part was sticking down a little bit because it got stretched, that's okay. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. It's not laying on anything, but you want these to be arranged accurately as you can. So worry more about this than this area, and just make sure that you're not forcing anything to go somewhere because you'll notice it as you fuse, and it can pinch kind of areas or pull fabric, and you want it to lay as flat as it can. Okay, so step F, leaves B through E. So again, we're going to start with B1, popping it out. I've got a little thread. Actually, I've got 2 threads sticking. It's funny too because some fabrics it seems like they're all having little threads on this one color all the time, and then others you won't have them hardly at all. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just peel the back off. Now B is this leaf over here. Some of it is hiding under the cathedral window. So this is an area where if you wanted, you could lift this up and kind of take a look and say, oh, okay, I sort of see that point. And I find that if I look at it, drop it, I can still see where that point is. Like I kind of just keep my eye in that area and I can go, okay, I see it, and I know where to put it down. B2, these little skinny ones. Again, be gentle with them. Fold it over and peel that paper off the back. Again, kind of gently. Now and these ones here, I can't even see where that vein is through the fabric and with the light table turned down. So I just sort of stick it through the center. If it's off a little bit, nobody's going to notice that. I promise you nobody's going to notice. And again, I'm not telling you to be sloppy. I'm telling you that they're forgiving. So don't feel like my leaf vein isn't perfectly where it was supposed to be and that anybody is going to notice it, because I promise you, nobody's going to notice that. And as we get going on the flowers, I'll show you a few things too So again, I'm just putting each leaf down and putting the vein through the center. So we're on D1, and then we want to do D2. And just kind of through the center. E1, and this is the last of this color green. That's all done. You can save those pieces if you want. You can throw it away. We're not going to need any more of that. And then leaf E is the one down here that's going to cover up that little stem there. And E2, and that is it for this green. So we are done with the greens at this point. Woohoo! Peel that off. Okay, goes like that. Just kind of lay it through the center. I really can't even see where the vein goes, so I just stick it in the middle. It looks great. Okay, so final step, G, flowers 4 through 19. Now we have a lot of stuff left here, but that's okay. We're going to get through these flowers. Okay, so 4 through 19. First thing I'm going to look at is where is 4? Okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, right here in this group in the middle. So I'm going to start with, now keep in mind, there's a couple flowers that are pink. So if you're looking at your blue one and you're like, I cannot find flower 5. Am I crazy? Where is flower 5? Oh, yeah, it's over here. It's right here. Okay, so 4 is blue and it has an A on it. What does that mean? That means there's going to be a B and there's probably going to be a C and maybe that's it. So here's 4C. 4B is going to be this one. So these white ones are all B's. These yellow ones are all C's, just so you know. Okay, 4. So here's my flower 4. So I'm going to just give you an example here of how this is forgiving. So 4 goes like this. If I put 4 like this, it's really not going to be noticeable, especially once I take this out from behind it, right? Once this is gone, can you tell that that's upside down? I cannot tell that that's upside down. And I'll bet you nobody else is going to come to you later and say, flower 4 is upside down. Did you know that? Nobody's going to say that. They're going to go, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. You did that? That's amazing. And you're going to say, yeah, I know. Thank you. So, okay, 4B. Here's another one where this little kind of brightness in the center of the flower, these ones here, especially as you get through multiple layers, they become harder and harder to kind of see the lines. And I find that, again, I'm just going to lay it in there in the middle. I think that might actually be the right way. If I went like this, did any of you notice that there's a difference? Probably not. And you know what? I'm going to leave that one like that. I know it's upside down. I don't care. I don't care that it's upside down because I really don't think that it's noticeable. And I don't think you're going to notice when I take that paper away. And someday, if you come to Alaska and you see my sample, I don't think you're going to be like, which one was it? Which one was upside down? I think, oh, it was 4. Remember 4? Oh, you can tell that white is totally upside down. Ruins the whole quilt. 5A. And those yellow ones in the middle too, they are mostly like ovals or circles. I just plop them in the center. I don't even really worry about whether or not it is upside down or right side up. I don't even know if I'd be able to tell, especially in an oval. So again, some of these you can kind of tell, oh, that sort of curvy part, that goes onto the top. I just stick it. Okay, I'll put it up. I'll put it so it's right side up. I'm not even really looking to see if I'm doing it exactly right. And the center, 6, where's 6? Here we go, the blue here. So on some pieces for sure, you're gonna wanna make sure, you know, that you do them right side up or something. There will be some that are noticeable for sure. But there's gonna be a lot of them that, like these little forget-me-not flowers in particular, where if your flower is upside down, you're not gonna really notice it. If the little white part in the center is upside down, you're not gonna notice that either. I'm not even really looking that closely as to which way I'm placing these yellow and white pieces. So again, not trying to be sloppy, just telling you that they're all forgiving, and it's nature. Nature is not perfect, and your flowers are not going to grow and look exactly like my flowers. So don't try to make your flowers look like my flowers, because it's going to be impossible to make them exactly the same. And I know for some people, it's really hard not to like, oh, I want to do it the way that it's supposed to be. Well, again, I'm very, I'm actually very much an OCD person. I do like things to be, the way they're supposed to be on a lot of things. But I've just found that in this case, it's not anything that I'm going to see later and realize something was upside down or something was backwards, or boy, I didn't get that white piece right in the exact center of that one. So I've done those first 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm moving on to 8, 9, 10. So just so you know, I'm coming up here. I'm kind of referencing my book over here. Where's 8, 9, 10? Okay, it's this little group here. And doo-doo goes like, which way does this one go? Goes like this? Like this? Did I pull the right one? I'm going to put that one like that. Okay. So 8, center here. And the little yellow piece. 9 is blue. Excuse me. 9, and these are some of the ones that, again, like I said, my laser, when I digitized, was kind of inside the line, and then when it cuts inside even further, so they are a little small compared to the drawing that you're following, so just have them kind of within the middle there. Also, some people find that on these tiny little pieces that using tweezers is helpful, especially if you don't have fingernails. So I'm going to do number 10 here, and this is the part where you're going to just want to curse me out because it is really a tiny bunch of tiny little things. I just did one little bud thing, and the way these forget-me-nots grow their little buds is very cute, but a little bit of a nightmare when you're putting these little dots together. So these little buds just kind of trail down the side of this stem here and go, and if you don't put them exactly in the exact spot, again, it's okay. Don't stress. I just kind of reference the guide. We have A, B, C, D goes right under C, and then we go back and forth again, E, F, G. And if you need tweezers, this is the place where you would want to use those. I have very short fingernails these days. Been doing a lot of pottery and ceramic stuff lately, which is kind of my next adventure here. And I'm doing some designs that will coordinate with my fabrics and my designs. So I'm excited about doing some of that. And so I've been keeping my fingernails shorter because ceramics, you jab them into clay, and then you have fingernails everywhere. So if you ever end up buying a cup or something that I make, you might end up getting some of my fingernail markings in there, which just makes it handmade, right? Handmade things, they're not perfect. It's part of their beauty. Okay, so 11, 12, 13 is this little group up here. 11 is this little pink one, and 11 is one of the only ones that actually only has 2 parts. So it is 11, and I can't see 11. I'm gonna this is one of those times where I'm gonna peek underneath. Okay, it's about right here. I'm just gonna put that there. And 11 is actually the only other yellow one that 11 is actually a B, not a C. Although in the description I do say all the yellows are part C. Well, I lied on that one. That one's actually just an A and a B. Sorry about that. Okay, 12 is a blue one, and I have a little thread sticking out. I'm going to snip that off. 12B. And plop that in the middle. And 12C. Plop that in the middle. Oops, that's not in the middle. In the middle. Okay, 13A. We're getting there. We're getting there. So as you guys get moving on and get doing these, you're going to be like, oh, I don't even need to watch those videos. I know what I'm doing. This isn't even hard. It looks hard. So, you know, people will be really impressed with the work that you do. You don't have to tell them how easy it is. Although on this first one, you might be laughing when I say easy, because this one is a little bit of a challenge. And it's not really a challenge of the design. It's a challenge of the scale of the design. Okay, so 13. So now we're moving over here. We're doing 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 will be our last one. So yeah, so I do, oop, wait, 14 is this little pink one. That's the end of pink. Get rid of pink. And 14, that pink one does have a B and a C part. But yeah, wait till you finish this and you show somebody and you say, oh yeah, I made that. I cut all those pieces out by hand. Can you believe it? By the way, don't ever go on Wildfire Designs Alaska website and find out that I bought a laser kit. Or you'll tell your friends. Don't tell the guys that that's how we did it. Just tell them that I cut everything out. But if you like doing stuff like this, go on wildfiredesignsalaska.com and get a laser kit, because they're amazing. When they first started doing laser kits, I remember thinking, that's such cheating. Like, you don't even have to cut everything out by hand. And just so you know, I've made 3 of these quilts cutting everything out by hand. I didn't get a laser machine till 2015. I did this design in 2013. Actually, I worked on it in 2012 because I did it as a shop hop for the Alaska stores. And then in 2014, I made the book, and I made a sample from the book to test it. And then I ended up making a third sample. I can't remember why. Maybe I did. Oh, I know why. The very first, so I did the shop hop. I designed the blocks. So I was just playing, kind of doing the designing. Then I was like, okay, now I have to write instructions for the shop hop. So I had already made one as my initial one. Then I had to test my shop hop instructions. So I did a second one. Then when I went to make it into a book the next year, I had to test again my book instructions. So I ended up doing 3 of them, and I had to hand cut all 3 of those quilts. So I always tell people, you can definitely hand cut this. I did 3 of them. But now, and then years later, I had a shop that wanted to do it as a shop hop. And I was like, absolutely, I can do that, but I'd have to digitize it. So I ended up deciding, you know, I'll go ahead and do it. Digitized them. I hate digitizing, but I was like, oh, if I do a couple blocks a month, it's not so bad. So I got it all digitized, and now, oh my goodness, I don't think you could pay me enough to have to hand cut another one of these. I don't even want to do more laser cuts of them. I'm like, how many samples do you need of this block or this quilt? But it's been really fun doing it this year. And actually last year is the first year when I started to do it with using my fabric. So when I first did the very first shop hop, and you notice on the cover photo that they're all different prints. So when I first did it, I just did a bunch of random colors, and they were all just batiks that were available that year with Hoffman, and none of them were mine. And when I first did the design, I told my mom, well, what would be really cool is if the fabrics were mine too, so that the whole thing is mine, you know, all the drawings are mine, the layout, the design, and the fabrics. I'm doing number 19 here. We're almost done. But back then I hadn't started designing fabrics with Hoffman yet. So now, when I redid this one, I did it using, so this is one of my batiks, all of them, all the flower prints and stuff in this one are my batiks. So I really, even though it was like, I don't want to do that quilt again, I have enjoyed making it and seeing it with all my stuff, because it's finally the way that I had wanted it. Oops, in the original way, with everything being my drawings. Okay, so I just finished. Yay! Okay, so now we're done, and I'll take this out from behind the back. So we've got everything laid out. Everything is finished. Thank goodness you did it. And little pieces of paper all over the place. So now what do we do? Okay, turn this off. Here's our block. How lovely it looks. So now the last step is going to be fusing. So the fusing steps. How do you fuse steam-a-steam? Well, let me show you, because a lot of people also do this wrong. So here's my block. I'm just going to do it this way for the fusing tutorial part here. Okay, so if you have a steam iron, and forgive me, this is a little dirty. Sorry about that. If you have a steam iron, you can steam it. If you don't have a steam iron, you can also use a spray bottle on a mist setting to apply what is essentially ends up being the steam. So we're going to do, I actually, because I had the steam iron that I loved and the steaming part died on it, and I've tried a couple irons since then and I've just not liked any of them. And I had one iron that we have a lot of iron as in the mineral in our water up here, and I was putting even distilled water into it, but I think I must have put regular water, or I filtered water or something. Anyhow, I went to steam something one time with that sucker and it spit out all this iron mineral stuff all over my design. I was so mad because you couldn't get it out. And so since then, I just decided I'm not using that. I'm not going to have it do that again. I'm not going to risk it. I've just been using a spray bottle, because between the time when my one iron died and my other was when I was looking for another one, I was using a spray bottle instead of a steamer. And I actually really like just using the spray bottle. So, okay, so now that we're at this part of fusing, what do we do? First step, don't just start steaming it right away. First thing, again, make sure your iron is on a medium setting. First thing we're always going to do is just lightly set this down, press, lift, do not rub it across. Why not? These aren't stuck yet. If you go and rub your iron across it, you run the risk that one of these is going to peel up and it's going to stick to your iron, and essentially that applique is now ruined and you've got glue on your iron and it's a mess. Press down just for a couple seconds, lift up. Press down, a couple seconds, lift up. Press down. And we're going to do this over the whole thing. Now, what are we doing right now? We're warming up that glue, and we're also gently pressing and giving this all these appliques a little temporary hold onto the background, so that when we do go to blast it with steam, or we go to do the spray bottle or something, and any sort of, even when you spray it, you get a little bit of a psh, psh, and you have a chance that something is going to move from just the air hitting it, or for the steamer, or even the water hitting it and the force of that. And so we're just warming that glue up and getting everything to kind of just temporarily hold. Okay, held. Now, if you have a steam iron, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take our steam iron. I'm going to lift this up at an angle. I don't know if this is going to work. No, it's not going to work very well. Okay, I'm just going to explain. Okay, so if we take our steam iron, we're going to go ahead and we're going to press. If this is the fabric, we're going to hold our steam iron about 1 inch to 1/2 inch from the fabric surface. Blast it with steam for a count of around 5 to 8 seconds. Then, 5-6 seconds. Really good and steamy. Then we're going to just press it right up against the fabric and hold it there. So if I'm doing steam, I'm holding it about 1 inch, 1/2 inch above this space, this footprint. And then we're going to go and set it straight down on it. Hold it there for about another 10 seconds. Lift it up. Next footprint. Count of set it down on there for about 10 more seconds. And you're going to do that all over the whole top. Flip it over. Do it from the back. Why do it from the back? Because all those appliques are holding on to this fabric, right? This background. If you have some like these little yellow pieces, okay, so the yellow's on top, then you have white, then you have blue, and some of them are even on top of a stem. So you might have 4 layers here. And if you only steam from the top, you might get that steam all the way down to the bottom layer. but you might not. So if you flip it to the back and you do it here, you know that you're getting that steam penetrating through everything. And what's the most important part is that it sticks to the background, right? So they don't fall off. So you want to make sure you do it from the back as well. So that way you really get that steam in there. You know that you've fused it really well. So again, not a really high heat. If you find that you are seeing little dots of that fusible web showing through on your colors, especially lighter colors, that's an indication that your iron is too hot. Turn your iron down. Okay, so we're going to do it with the spray bottle. My favorite way. So I'm going to spray an area. I'm going to get it pretty wet. Then I'm going to take my iron and I'm just going to set it down there. And I'm just going to leave it there for about a count of 10 to 12. And I'm not moving everything around. I'm not wiggling everything up. Thread. There we go. Not a thread stuck to that. It was just a thread that got under there. Okay. Spray the next area next to it. Lift. Flip it. Put it down. Let it steam that area good. And as you first start doing this too, if you're not sure about your iron's heat setting, once you've done one little spot, you can take a look and see, does it look like, am I seeing any of those little dots? I don't want to see those little dots because, and I sometimes still have a situation where I have my iron set, or maybe I've turned the heat setting up for something else and I forgot to turn it down. And I've looked and I've been like, oh shoot, I got some little dots showing up. Well, that means turn your iron down. You got it up too hot. So what will happen there is it's so hot that it's like overheating the glue. I always say it's like frying the glue. And then what happens is it doesn't want to stick well. It doesn't like melt in and hold everything down well. So you want to give it just the heat that it needs to be able to evaporate that steam. That steam is what really gets it to hold too. And also, not to overdo the glue to where you've basically burnt it and then it doesn't want to stick. So that's the problem that people sometimes find. I've heard people have told me they don't use steam, and I've found that for me, not using steam seems to end up where my appliques just don't fuse as well, or they don't hold as well. And so the steam I think is really important in my opinion. To really getting a good bond. The other thing with the steaming too, and just because I've had people in the past who've said like, I don't like steam because of different things, or they've had things lift or whatever. I don't wash my samples very often. You know, I've actually hardly ever have actually thrown them in the wash. And so if you are planning to use this on a bed and you do think you're going to be washing it, I will tell you, first of all, make sure that when you wash it, you put it on a really delicate cycle. And I do not ever recommend throwing them in the dryer. And the reason that I say that is because the dryer is essentially taking a wet article and it's drying it, right? Okay, so what am I doing right now? I'm wetting this and then I'm drying it with the iron. And what is that doing? That's warming up my glue and it's making it fuse. Now, if you have something start to lift, you can re-wet it and re-steam it. And if it hasn't over-fried your glue before, it should kind of stick back in place. When you put it in the dryer, you're essentially re-steaming it, and you run the risk that you're loosening that glue up and things are going to fall off, and that will happen in the dryer. So if you ever do wash these, make sure that you wash them and then hang them dry. And if you need to after that to iron like little wrinkles here and there or something, you can do that after the fact. But the other thing is too, so now that I've done the whole thing, I do kind of go do a little run over it, some heat, done the whole top here. And I'm going to flip it over. And my little corners, remember your little corners stick out. So when you go to do the back, I kind of avoid those little corners. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to steam from the back. And I am noticing a couple spots where I do have a few of those little dots showing up here. So I'm going to just make sure not to quite put the heat. I'm going to lower it a little bit. And continue to go on the back. So other things, when it comes time to doing quilting, I am going to show you how I usually quilt this quilt, and I'm going to give you some recommendations at that point that we do the finishing kit. But I will also tell you, if you're ever doing any of my other designs, I don't always steam it quite as long on the back as I do on the front. If if you do any of my other designs, you can certainly do an overall stitch that kind of hits all your appliques. So if you do decide that you want to wash it or you want to put something on a quilt and you want to make sure it holds well, that you have kind of caught all of the appliques through some stitching, just because it is, after all, a glue holding it on. It's not a stitch holding it down. So you do have, glue will break down over time, even really good glues. And these, this Steam a Seam I've been using since I first started designing in 2007, and I have samples from 2007 that they don't get washed, they don't get moved around a lot these days. Most of the time, they used to travel a lot, and none of them have lost any appliques. Now, I don't wash them, but they have been moved around. They have been hung up at one place and brought to another place and laid out and then gotten thrown in a box, brought back to the next place. And a lot of them the last few years have been living in a connex outside my house. So they've been out with the heat and the cold throughout the year, and the appliques are still stuck very, very well, and they aren't coming off at all. And so I'm not worried when it's something that's going to hang on a wall or something you're not going to be, doing this with all the time, that you don't really need to do stitching. But if you are planning to use it as a blanket, or you're thinking that it's going to be loved on a lot more, I do recommend doing some stitching, that even if when it comes time to quilt, you do something that's an overall kind of tighter applique. If it hits most of those, it's going to hold it pretty well. If you ever have something that does start to come up, and I'm scratching these to check, and they're stuck on there really well. They're not fraying or anything. But if you do have a point where you are thinking that something's coming up, you try to re-steam it, it's not sticking, you can always take a fabric glue. And what I'll do is I'll take like a toothpick or something that has like a little point and put the glue on there, and then just rub it underneath the applique and gently press it down and let it dry. So anyways, we're finished with block number 1. And I hope that you enjoyed doing it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the blocks. I will try to remind you, this is one of the more difficult ones because of all the little pieces. But if you finish this block, you can do all of them. I promise you. So we're going to go on to block number 2 next. And I will keep chit-chatting, because that's what I do when I'm in my studio by myself, talking to people that aren't actually here. I just keep going and going and going. So anyhow, block number 1 is finished. Good job. Let's move on to number 2 now.